Hey everyone, welcome back. I am genuinely so excited for this explainer today because we are diving into one of the ultimate, longest standing mysteries of human evolution. And the craziest part, the evidence has literally been hiding right at the ends of our arms this whole time. We are looking at a brand new, fascinating paper called Bipedalism and Brain Expansion Explain Human-Handedness. It's led by researchers Thomas A. Puschel, Rachel M. Hurwitz, and Chris Venditti, and it was literally just published in the journal PLOS Biology. Treat this like an evolutionary breaking news story, you guys. These researchers essentially acted as cold case detectives, and they might have finally cracked a mystery that has baffled scientists for absolute decades. To really grasp why this discovery is such a huge deal right now, we gotta start with a staggering number: 90%. Across every human culture, every single corner of the globe, roughly 90% of us are right-handed. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, sure, so what? But if you look at the wider natural world, this is just bizarre. It's an extreme anomaly. Having an ambiguous or mixed hand preference is incredibly rare in humans, and honestly, that demands an explanation. Why on earth are we overwhelmingly wired to favor just one side? For a long time, the origin of this, what scientists call population-level lateralization, meaning basically everyone in a population leaning the exact same way, it's been completely enigmatic. But this new paper, it's an absolute game changer. Because instead of just, throwing out descriptive theories, Puschel, Hurwitz, and Venditti actually crunched the numbers on an unprecedented scale to finally separate what makes us uniquely human from just general primate behavior. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, the suspect board. Why are we like this? Well, before this new research came along, evolutionary biologists had a pretty long list of potential culprits. For years, scientists have been penning these classic theories to a metaphorical suspect board. They thought maybe complex tool use or changes in our diet, our habitat, or even body mass caused us to become right-handed. The problem was that a lot of these explanations were kind of just existing at the same time in the scientific literature. There wasn't really a clear way to test them against each other. They were just competing hypotheses stuck on a board. So, to finally solve this, the researchers set up what is basically the ultimate primate forensic lineup. They didn't just look at humans and chimps. No, they combined data across 41 different anthropoid species, testing a massive 2,025 individual primates. They ran what's called a phylogenetic comparative meta-analysis, which, in plain English, just means they mathematically mapped out hand preference against the entire evolutionary family tree. They accounted for all those old hypotheses, tool use, diet, the whole shebang, just to see what actually held up under intense scrutiny. And what's absolutely fascinating here is the sheer contrast between us and our primate cousins. When they looked at the raw data, they saw that non-human primates simply do not show this population-level handedness direction. Like, sure, an individual monkey might have a favorite hand, but the species as a whole doesn't overwhelmingly lean right or left. When you look at their statistical models, Homo sapiens is an absolute statistical outlier. We completely break the mold. But, and here's the kicker, the researchers found that our weird outlier status completely vanishes when you factor in two very specific physiological traits. The first trait is the intermembral index, or IMI. Let's translate that jargon instantly. IMI is quite simply the ratio of your arm length to your leg length. Humans have a really low IMI of 72, which just means our legs are significantly longer than our arms. Simply put, this is the anatomical footprint of walking upright. It's the literal metric for bipedalism. The second trait is endocranial volume, or ECV. This one is super straightforward. It's just the internal volume of our skull. It's a direct measurement of our incredibly massive brain size. So after testing every possible hypothesis against that massive primate lineup, walking upright and having huge brains were the two main physiological suspects left standing. Which brings us to Section 2, the big reveal. 2 culprits, 1 outcome. This is the core discovery of the paper, revealing that our weirdly biased hands are actually the result of a 2-part evolutionary synergy. So the crucial point you have to understand here is that hand preference actually has 2 facets. There's strength and there's direction. The researchers discovered that bipedalism, walking upright, gave us the raw strength and consistency of our hand preference. Basically, by freeing our arms from the heavy burden of walking, it created this massive opportunity for highly specialized, one-sided hand use. Meanwhile, our massive brain expansion, that is what steered the direction of that preference so heavily over to the right side.
To really get why walking upright matters so much here, we have to look at a super interesting primate trend. In general, monkeys that live up in the trees, the arboreal species, they need really strong hand preferences because they need flexible stabilization and precise motor control to swing through the canopy safely. Terrestrial species, the ones living down on the ground, face simpler environments, so they usually have much weaker hand preferences. But humans, we are the great exception. We live entirely on the ground, yet we maintain this incredible handedness strength. Why? Well, because bipedalism completely freed our arms from moving us around, allowing us to use them asymmetrically way more frequently than any other primate lineage out there.
Let's move on to Section 3, the hominin timeline, tracing the bias. How exactly did this two-part process unfold over millions of years in our direct ancestors? Well, the researchers actually used their models to predict the handedness of extinct hominins, giving us a literal living timeline.
Let's map this out and see how it builds. Going way back 4.4 million years ago, Ardipithecus ramidus had a very weak directional bias. Fast forward to 3.2 million years ago, Australopithecus afarensis had a moderate bias, but hit the 2.0 million year mark with Homo erectus, and boom, we see a strong bias. And finally, present-day Homo sapiens have that extreme rightward bias we see today. And notice exactly when that rightward bias dramatically spikes. It aligns perfectly with the emergence of the Homo genus, literally right when our brains rapidly expanded.
And this brilliantly illustrates the paper's most profound insight, if you ask me. If you look at the evolutionary tree, the strength of hominin hand use was actually consistently high right from the very beginning, basically ever since we started walking upright. But the rightward direction? That only took off later on, as we got smarter and our brains went through some really complex cortical reorganization.
Now, to prove just how solid this model is, the researchers point to a completely wild anomaly, Homo floresiensis. You might know them as the extinct hobbit humans. Despite being in the Homo genus, they actually had significantly weaker right-handedness. And why? Well, it turns out they had unusually small brains for their time, and they had this weird walking style with long climbing feet that blended upright walking with arboreal tree climbing. So they actually perfectly matched the model. A smaller brain and a less dedicated walking style directly resulted in weaker right-handedness. It's like the exception that proves the rule.
Okay, bringing it all home with Section 4, the evolutionary big picture. What this means for us. Now, while this model is incredibly robust, I should mention there's still an open question here. We still don't know exactly why the expanding brain pushed preference specifically to the right side, instead of just a neat 50-50 split. We know the brain did it, but the precise neurological mechanics are still a bit of a mystery being explored. Still, practically speaking, this means we can finally toss out the idea that human-handedness is just some random cultural quirk. It gives us a real framework for untangling our human-specific adaptations from general animal behaviors. Which leaves us with this final crazy thought. What does your dominant hand actually say about what makes you human? The next time you grab a pen or pick up a coffee cup or just scroll on your phone, take a second to look at your hand. That simple, totally subconscious preference, it's absolutely not an accident. It's a direct, living reflection of our unique evolutionary journey. It's the anatomical legacy of a species that stood up to walk the earth and expanded its mind enough to actually understand it. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you guys on the next explainer.